rained again last night, and unfortunately it was a really heavy rain, just like before, and it absolutely soaked my entire workbench. So today, before I get started on anything, I already went through and took my my air hose and blew away lots of the heavy stuff, like the actual sitting water. And now I'm using my my torch here to quickly heat the metal and basically speed up the evaporation process, so that even the tiny little bits of moisture that are sitting in the cracks and whatnot, and down in the pits and kind of hard to get with a towel or anything else, will naturally just evaporate all on its own. And then once everything's evaporated, I can go through with a wire brush. Probably use the wire brush on my grinder, and I'll knock away any of the stuff that's left over, anything that actually forms. But it is a pretty therapeutic process just to watch this water evaporate like this, almost like mowing the lawn or something. Alright, this is the basic bracket setup. I've got 4 of these made. These are the short cross members that go between the central upright and the rear upright. The central upright is where the J hooks are used whenever you want to have a full safety system inside the middle and the front upright. And the rear upright is where you use for plate storage. So these don't have to be as long. Now I'm going to do this exact same type of bracket setup for the longer cross members that go between the middle and the front as well. And then this is a standalone cross member. This separates the left side of the squat rack from the right side of the squat rack and keeps it from swaying back and forth. And because of that, because you can't put one on the bottom or else it'd interfere with your feet and you wouldn't be able to walk through the rack, this top one has to be able to function as a lateral support and stabilizer by itself. So because of that, I wanted to separate the bolts as much as possible and really get a good wide stance on its ability, so it can really keep those uprights as straight and rigid as possible. So for that, I wanted to be able to put this cross member as high as possible. So I cut a section out of here, as you can see right there, and you actually reach in to this hole right here. You reach in through the top of the tube and then bolt this in place, and then all the way down here at the bottom, 8 inches lower, there's the secondary bolt, and then of course with this real big 45 lateral support on there. So by having these twin, see, one on each side, these twin oversized lateral supports, along with separating these mounting bolts by 8 inches, I'm hoping that will be sufficient in making these uprights and the left-right side of the rack as rigid as possible. Alright, I'm also using a special welding rod for this project. Basically, I try not to rant on too long here. I get excited about this stuff. I end up talking too much about it, but this is the welding rod I use for just general purpose stuff. This has got a different nomenclature since we live in Asia. All this stuff has different nomenclatures, but this is the equivalent to like an old school 6013 or 6011 rod. Just all purpose, just generally good for everything. No special characteristics other than the fact that it's really easy to weld with and it's cheap. But even though I tacked everything together with this just to get stuff in place, this is a welding rod I'm going to be using for the rest, all the final welds. This is what they use for when they're welding on railroads, when they're doing the hulls of ships, when they're doing bridges, basically anything that is really heavy duty steel that not only is going to carry and support a lot of weight, but is also going to have a lot of flexing by its inherent purpose. So if you were to use a typical welding rod like this with something that carries a lot of weight and it flexes and it moves and it kind of twists, there's a good chance that it might crack or fail at some point. But this is actually designed for it. So it's designed to be able to maintain its structural integrity even while flexing and all this other stuff. So that's why they use it on bridges and railroads and ships and everything else, because it's flexible while still insanely strong. Now it's actually very difficult to weld with this rod. It's more expensive, it's more difficult to weld with, and the final weld usually ends up looking very smooth, almost like sitting still water, rather than the typical little dimes that you build up. So it's not as pretty and it's not very easy to weld with, but it's perfect for this application. It gives me just about as strong of a weld I can possibly get, and then no matter how much this stuff twists or warps or flexes or anything else, how many times you slam a barbell into it or whatever else, this will never crack. So this is perfect for this job. Alright, well, so far so good. I've got these middle uprights laid back. I've got that center cross member that separates the left side of the rack from the right side of the rack, and everything bolted right up. Like, not even off by a little bit. It lined up perfectly. That was probably the smoothest test fit I've ever had in my life, but I should probably stop talking now before something goes terribly wrong. Oh, it's big. Oh, goddamn. Does that work? That's the beginning of a squat rack. Awesome. Alright, what now? I gotta cut some more bolts and then start attaching these pieces here. Let's see. Alright, this is it so far. So these are the middle uprights. This is where the main J-cups usually hang, facing this way so you can load the bar. The front uprights will be way back here with a lot more space, and that's where you usually have squat and everything else. And these are the rear uprights. This is where you typically hang the weight for storage and things like that. But I made sure to replicate everything that'll be up here is also replicated back here. So if you wanted, you could keep the plate storage somewhere else and actually use this as a secondary workout area if you wanted to. But so far so good.